For 40 years, the United States government conducted one of the most horrifying medical experiments in American history. 600 black men in rural Alabama were told they were receiving free health care from the federal government itself. They were never informed that they were actually subjects in a secret study designed to observe the effects of untreated syphilis. When penicillin became the standard cure for syphilis in 1947, the government made a calculated and deliberate decision. They chose not to treat these men, even though a simple course of antibiotics could have saved hundreds of innocent lives. Instead, researchers continued to watch, document symptoms, and wait patiently for their test subjects to die from the disease. This is not a conspiracy theory or an exaggeration designed to shock you into watching this documentary about American medical history. Every single detail you are about to hear has been verified through congressional testimony, federal archives, and court documents. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has officially acknowledged this atrocity and issued formal apologies to surviving families. In 1997, President Bill Clinton stood before the nation and apologized on behalf of the United States government for this betrayal. The evidence is stored in the National Archives, available for any citizen who wants to verify these disturbing historical facts. This is the true story of the Tuskegee syphilis study, a dark chapter that fundamentally changed medical ethics in America forever. The year was 1932. And the Great Depression had devastated communities across the entire United States of America without mercy. But nowhere was the suffering more acute than in the rural black communities of the Deep South, where poverty was absolute. Macon County, Alabama was one of the poorest regions in the entire nation, with almost no access to basic medical care. The majority of residents were sharecroppers who worked land they did not own and earned wages that barely sustained their families. Most had never seen a doctor in their entire lives, and preventable diseases ran rampant through the isolated community. Into this desperate landscape came representatives from the United States Public Health Service with an offer that seemed miraculous. They promised free medical examinations, free treatment, and free meals for anyone who agreed to participate in their program. For people who had never received any medical attention, this seemed like an answered prayer from the federal government itself. The Public Health Service set up operations at the Tuskegee Institute, a prestigious black university founded by Booker T. Washington. The involvement of this respected institution gave the program an air of legitimacy that convinced many skeptical residents to join. Local black doctors and nurses were recruited to help administer the program, though most were not told the study's true purpose. Eunice Rivers, a black nurse from the area, became the primary point of contact between the researchers and the test subjects. She would remain involved with the study for its entire 40-year duration, earning the trust of participants and their families. The researchers identified 600 black men to participate in their study, all of them poor sharecroppers from the surrounding rural areas. Of these 600 men, 399 had already contracted syphilis before the study began, though most did not know they were infected. The remaining 201 men did not have syphilis and would serve as the control group for comparison throughout the experiment. None of these men were ever told the true purpose of the study or that they were being used as human guinea pigs. The researchers told participants they were being treated for bad blood, a colloquial term used for various ailments in the South. This deliberately vague diagnosis allowed the scientists to avoid ever explaining what disease they were actually studying in these men. The men received placebos, aspirin, and vitamin supplements, but they never received any actual treatment for their syphilis infections. They were given free meals on examination days, free transportation to and from the clinic, and free burial insurance for families. These small incentives were enough to ensure continued participation from men who had almost nothing in their desperate lives. The study was originally designed to last only 6 months, intended as a short-term observation of untreated syphilis progression. But when funding ran out and the initial phase ended, the Public Health Service made a fateful decision to continue watching. They realized they had a unique opportunity to observe the complete progression of syphilis from infection to death in human subjects. No ethical review board approved this extension because no such oversight mechanisms existed in American medicine at that time. The researchers simply decided on their own authority that the scientific value justified continuing the experiment indefinitely. Dr. Taliaferro Clark, who initiated the study, retired shortly after it began and was replaced by Dr. Raymond Vonderlehr. Vonderlehr would become the driving force behind the study's continuation, aggressively pursuing the research for decades to come. He established protocols to ensure that participants would remain in the study and never receive treatment from outside sources. Local doctors were informed that these men were part of a government study and should not be given any treatment for syphilis. Draft boards during World War II were contacted to prevent participants from receiving the standard syphilis treatment given to soldiers. When participants sought medical care elsewhere, Public Health Service officials intervened to ensure they remained untreated and available for study. The men were actively prevented from receiving treatment that could have cured their disease and saved their lives completely. This was not passive neglect or bureaucratic oversight, but a deliberate and coordinated effort to maintain the integrity of the study. The researchers needed untreated syphilis patients to observe, and they took active steps to ensure these men remained untreated. By 1936, it was already clear that the study was producing valuable data about the progression of syphilis in human subjects. The researchers published their first major paper detailing the cardiovascular complications they observed in their untreated patient population. This paper was published in a peer-reviewed medical journal, meaning other doctors read it and raised no ethical objections whatsoever. The medical establishment accepted the study as legitimate science, despite the obvious fact that treatment was being deliberately withheld. Over the following years, 13 more papers would be published in respected medical journals documenting the study's ongoing findings. Each publication was reviewed by editors and other physicians, yet no one questioned the ethics of watching men die from treatable disease. The study became an open secret in the American medical community, known to hundreds of doctors who never raised any objections. This widespread acceptance reveals how deeply racism had infected American medicine, allowing Black suffering to be viewed as acceptable. The researchers did not hide what they were doing because they genuinely believed their work was scientifically valuable and ethically sound. In their view, these poor Black sharecroppers were going to die of syphilis anyway, so observation caused no additional harm to them. This rationalization ignored the fundamental truth that these men could have been cured with readily available medical treatment. It also ignored the fact that untreated syphilis is contagious and that these men likely infected their wives and partners unknowingly. Children were born with congenital syphilis because their fathers were deliberately kept infected by the United States government's researchers. The human cost extended far beyond the 600 original participants to include families and communities that suffered for generations afterward. In 1943, penicillin was proven to be a safe and effective cure for syphilis, revolutionizing the treatment of this ancient disease. By 1947, penicillin had become the standard treatment for syphilis across the United States and was widely available to patients. The Tuskegee researchers faced a critical decision point that would define the moral character of their entire scientific enterprise. They could end the study and provide their participants with the cure, finally giving these men the treatment they desperately needed. Or they could continue the study, withholding the cure to preserve their ability to observe the natural progression of the disease. The researchers chose to continue, and this decision transformed the study from negligent research into deliberate medical murder. Before penicillin, one could argue that the researchers were simply observing a disease for which no effective treatment existed anywhere. After penicillin, there was no such excuse available to justify their continued withholding of a proven and accessible cure. The men in the study were now being actively denied a cure that was saving lives across America and around the entire world. Dr. John Heller, who directed the study from 1943 to 1948, later defended this decision with a statement that revealed everything. He said the men's status did not warrant ethical debate because they were subjects, not patients, in the eyes of the researchers. This distinction between subjects and patients allowed the researchers to deny these men the basic rights afforded to sick people. As subjects, they existed only to provide data, and their health and survival were secondary to the scientific goals of the study. The Public Health Service actively worked to prevent participants from receiving penicillin treatment from any source throughout the region. They contacted local health departments conducting syphilis treatment programs and had Tuskegee participants excluded from receiving the cure. When the participants sought treatment on their own, researchers intervened to ensure they did not receive the antibiotics that would help. One participant later testified that he tried to get treatment, but was told he was already being taken care of by the government. He trusted this assurance because he had no reason to believe his own government would deliberately let him die from a curable disease. The researchers maintained detailed records of each participant's declining health, documenting symptoms with clinical precision and detachment. They noted the progression from primary syphilis to secondary syphilis to the devastating tertiary stage that destroys organs and minds. They documented blindness, paralysis, heart disease, and dementia, all preventable outcomes that they watched develop without any intervention. When participants died, the researchers arranged for autopsies to examine the damage that untreated syphilis had caused to their bodies. The burial insurance provided to families was actually an incentive to ensure that researchers could claim the bodies for examination. Families were told that autopsies were required to receive the burial benefits, so most agreed to let doctors examine their loved ones. These autopsies provided the researchers with detailed information about how syphilis destroys the human body over decades of infection. The data was considered scientifically valuable, but it came at the cost of human lives that could have been saved easily. By the 1960s, the study had been running for 3 decades, and a new generation of researchers had inherited the project. Some of these younger doctors began to question whether the study should continue, given the availability of effective treatment options. Dr. Irwin Schatz wrote a letter to the study directors in 1965, objecting to the ethics of withholding treatment from sick men. His letter was filed away and never answered, and the study continued without any changes to its protocols or treatment policies. Other doctors who learned about the study either accepted its premises or chose not to make waves within the medical establishment. The culture of American medicine in this era did not encourage young doctors to challenge their superiors or question ongoing research. The civil rights movement was transforming American society in the 1960s, but the Tuskegee study continued unchanged in rural Alabama. The same government that was passing civil rights legislation was simultaneously conducting a racist medical experiment on black citizens. This contradiction reveals how deeply institutional racism was embedded in American society, even during an era of supposed progress. The study might have continued indefinitely if not for the conscience of one man who decided he could no longer remain silent. Peter Buxton was a venereal disease investigator for the Public Health Service who learned about the study in 1966 during his work. He was horrified by what he discovered and immediately filed a formal protest with his superiors at the Public Health Service. Buxton argued that the study was unethical and should be terminated immediately, with all surviving participants receiving proper treatment. His concerns were reviewed by a panel of physicians at the Centers for Disease Control, which had inherited oversight of the study. The panel acknowledged that the study raised ethical concerns, but recommended that it continue until all participants had died naturally. They argued that stopping the study now would waste the scientific investment made over the previous 3 decades of observation. Buxton was told that his concerns had been noted, but that the study would continue as planned until its natural conclusion. He continued to work within the system for several more years, hoping that internal pressure would eventually force a policy change. By 1972, Buxton had concluded that the Public Health Service would never voluntarily end the study or provide treatment to participants. He made the decision that would change American medicine forever and expose one of the government's darkest secrets to the world. Buxton contacted Jean Heller, an Associated Press reporter, and provided her with documentation about the Tuskegee syphilis study's true nature. On July 25, 1972, Heller's story appeared on the front page of newspapers across the United States, shocking the American public. The headline revealed that the government had conducted a 40-year experiment on black men, deliberately withholding treatment for syphilis. The story detailed how 39 men with syphilis had been studied without their informed consent and denied access to proven treatment. It explained that by 1972, at least 108 participants had died directly from syphilis or complications related to their untreated infections. 40 wives had been infected by their husbands, who did not know they were contagious because they were never told their diagnosis. 19 children had been born with congenital syphilis, suffering from a disease that could have been prevented with proper treatment. The American public reacted with outrage and disbelief that their government could have conducted such a horrifying experiment on citizens. Civil rights leaders condemned the study as a racist atrocity that revealed the government's fundamental disregard for Black American lives. Medical professionals expressed shock, though many had known about the study for years and had never raised any public objections. Politicians demanded investigations and promised that those responsible would be held accountable for their actions against these innocent men. The Centers for Disease Control initially defended the study, arguing that it had produced valuable scientific data about syphilis progression. This defense collapsed quickly as public pressure mounted and the full scope of the ethical violations became impossible to ignore. Within days of the story breaking, the Assistant Secretary for Health ordered the immediate termination of the Tuskegee syphilis study. The surviving participants, now elderly men who had suffered for decades, were finally offered the treatment they should have received years ago. Only 74 of the original 399 syphilis patients were still alive when the study ended, the rest having died from the disease. These survivors were given penicillin and other medical care, though for many, the damage from decades of untreated syphilis was irreversible. Congress held hearings to investigate the study and determine how such an atrocity could have occurred within the federal government. Senator Edward Kennedy chaired hearings that brought national attention to the ethical failures that had allowed the study to continue. Witnesses testified about the deliberate deception of participants, the withholding of treatment, and the active prevention of outside care. The hearings revealed that the study had been approved and funded at the highest levels of the Public Health Service for decades. No single individual could be blamed because the entire system had accepted and perpetuated this racist experiment without significant objection. The medical establishment had failed catastrophically in its most basic duty to protect patients from harm and provide beneficial treatment. In 1973, the NAACP filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of the study participants and their families against the federal government. The lawsuit alleged that the government had violated the participants' civil rights and caused them immense physical and emotional suffering. The government chose to settle the lawsuit rather than defend its actions in court, where the evidence would have been devastating. In 1974, the settlement provided $10 million to be distributed among the survivors, families of deceased participants, and control group. Living syphilis patients received $37,500 each, while the heirs of deceased patients received $15,000 for their family members suffering. Living control group members received $16,000 each, and heirs of deceased control group members received $5,000 in compensation payments. The settlement also provided lifetime medical benefits for all surviving participants and medical benefits for wives and children who were infected. These benefits would continue until 2009, when the last known participant, Ernest Henton, died at the age of 96 years old. The financial settlement, while significant, could never compensate for the decades of suffering and the lives that were lost unnecessarily. The Tuskegee study's exposure led to fundamental changes in how medical research is conducted in the United States of America. In 1974, Congress passed the National Research Act, which created new requirements for protecting human subjects in medical research studies. The act established the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research to develop guidelines. This commission produced the Belmont Report in 1979, which established the ethical principles that now govern all human subjects research. The Belmont Report identified 3 core principles that must guide medical research involving human subjects in any research setting. The first principle is respect for persons, which requires that research subjects be treated as autonomous individuals capable of making decisions. This principle mandates that researchers obtain informed consent from participants, ensuring they understand the risks and benefits of participation. The second principle is beneficence, which requires researchers to maximize benefits and minimize harms to research subjects at all times. This principle prohibits research that offers no benefit to participants while exposing them to significant risks of harm or suffering. The third principle is justice, which requires that the benefits and burdens of research be distributed fairly across society. This principle prohibits targeting vulnerable populations for risky research while reserving beneficial treatments for more privileged groups. The Belmont Report's principles were codified into federal regulations that now govern all research funded by the United States government. Institutional review boards were established at universities and research institutions to review proposed studies before they can begin. These boards evaluate whether proposed research meets ethical standards and adequately protects the rights and welfare of human subjects. No federally funded research involving human subjects can proceed without approval from an institutional review board at the sponsoring institution. Informed consent became a legal requirement with specific standards for what information must be provided to potential research participants. Researchers must explain the purpose of the study, the procedures involved, the risks and benefits, and the participants' right to withdraw. Participants must sign consent forms documenting that they understand this information and voluntarily agree to participate in the research. Special protections were established for vulnerable populations, including prisoners, children, pregnant women, and people with cognitive impairments. These populations require additional safeguards because they may be subject to coercion or may not be able to provide fully informed consent. The regulatory framework created in response to Tuskegee has prevented countless potential abuses and protected millions of research participants. But the legacy of Tuskegee extends beyond regulations and institutional review boards to affect the relationship between Black Americans and medicine. Studies have consistently shown that Black Americans are less likely to trust medical institutions and participate in medical research studies. This distrust is not irrational, but is rooted in the documented history of medical abuse that Tuskegee represents most dramatically. The Tuskegee study confirmed Black Americans' worst fears about how the medical establishment viewed and treated their community members. It proved that the government was willing to sacrifice Black lives for scientific knowledge, treating them as expendable research subjects. This legacy of distrust has had real consequences for public health, reducing participation in clinical trials and vaccination programs. During the COVID-19 pandemic, some Black Americans cited Tuskegee as a reason for hesitancy about receiving the newly developed vaccines. Public health officials had to acknowledge this history and work to rebuild trust that had been destroyed decades earlier by government actions. The Tuskegee study's impact on Black health extends far beyond the 600 men who were directly victimized by the research program. It created a wound in the relationship between Black Americans and the healthcare system that has not fully healed even today. In 1997, President Bill Clinton took a step toward addressing this wound by issuing a formal apology on behalf of the government. The ceremony was held at the White House, with 5 of the 8 surviving study participants in attendance to hear the apology. Clinton acknowledged that what the government did was deeply, profoundly, and morally wrong and shameful to the United States of America. He said the United States government did something that was wrong, deeply, profoundly, morally wrong, and that it was a racist act. Clinton apologized to the survivors, to the families, and to the community that had been betrayed by those who were supposed to protect. He announced the establishment of the Tuskegee University National Center for Bioethics in Research and Healthcare as part of healing. This center would work to ensure that the lessons of Tuskegee would never be forgotten and that such abuses would never occur again. Herman Shaw, the oldest survivor present at the ceremony, responded to the apology on behalf of all the participants and their families. Shaw, who was 94 years old, said that the apology meant much to those who had survived and to families who had lost loved ones. He expressed hope that the apology would help heal the wounds that had festered for so long in the Black community's collective memory. The other survivors present were Charlie Pollard, Carter Howard, Fred Simmons, and Frederick Moss, all elderly men who had suffered for decades. These men had lived most of their lives not knowing they had been subjects in a government experiment that deliberately harmed their health. They had trusted their government and their doctors only to discover that this trust had been exploited in the most horrifying way. The apology could not undo the damage that had been done, but it acknowledged the wrong and promised that it would not be repeated. The Tuskegee University National Center for Bioethics was established with a $5 million grant from the federal government in 1999. The center conducts research on bioethics issues, provides education about research ethics, and works to increase minority participation in research. It serves as a living memorial to the men who suffered in the study and a resource for preventing future ethical violations. The center also works to address the legacy of distrust that Tuskegee created by engaging with communities and building relationships. This work is essential because the distrust created by Tuskegee continues to affect public health outcomes in Black communities nationwide. The participants who died during the study never received justice, and their families continue to live with the consequences of what happened. Many descendants of study participants have spoken publicly about how the study affected their families across multiple generations of suffering. Some learned that their fathers or grandfathers had been in the study only after the 1972 exposure revealed the truth to everyone. Others had always known something was wrong but did not understand the full scope of the betrayal until the details became public. The intergenerational trauma caused by the study is difficult to quantify but is very real for the families who continue to suffer. Children grew up without fathers who died from untreated syphilis, and some were born with congenital syphilis that affected their entire lives. The economic impact on families who lost breadwinners to a preventable disease compounded the poverty that already afflicted the community severely. The psychological impact of learning that your government deliberately let your family member die is a wound that may never fully heal. The Tuskegee syphilis study stands as one of the most thoroughly documented cases of medical abuse in the history of the United States. The evidence is preserved in the National Archives, available for researchers and the public to examine and verify for themselves completely. Congressional testimony, court documents, and government records provide a comprehensive picture of what happened and who was responsible for it. The published medical papers document the researchers' own observations and reveal their attitudes toward the men they were studying closely. This documentation ensures that the study cannot be denied or minimized, as some have attempted to do over the years since exposure. The facts are clear and undeniable, supported by evidence that the government itself created and preserved in official archives and records. The study lasted from 1932 to 1972, a period of 40 years during which the government knowingly allowed men to die from treatable disease. At least 108 men died directly from syphilis or related complications that could have been prevented with readily available medical treatment. 40 wives were infected with syphilis by husbands who did not know they were contagious because they were never informed of their diagnosis. 19 children were born with congenital syphilis, a completely preventable condition that caused lifelong suffering and disability for innocent babies. The total number of people harmed by the study extends far beyond the original participants to include families and community members affected. The researchers who conducted the study were never criminally prosecuted for their actions, despite causing the deaths of over 100 men. The statute of limitations had expired by the time the study was exposed, making criminal prosecution legally impossible under existing laws. Some of the researchers had already died by 1972, placing them beyond the reach of any earthly justice for their terrible crimes. Those who were still alive faced no legal consequences, though some faced professional criticism and damage to their reputations in medicine. Dr. John Heller, who had defended the study by saying participants were subjects rather than patients, never expressed remorse for his role. He maintained until his death that the study had been scientifically valuable and that the researchers had acted appropriately given the circumstances. This lack of accountability remains a source of anger for many who believe that those responsible should have faced criminal charges for murder. The institutional failures that allowed the study to continue for 40 years have been extensively analyzed by historians and ethicists since. The study was not the work of a few rogue researchers, but was approved and funded by the highest levels of the public health service. Multiple directors oversaw the study over its 40-year duration, and each one chose to continue rather than end the unethical research. The Centers for Disease Control reviewed the study in 1969 and recommended continuation, demonstrating institutional complicity at the highest levels. Peer-reviewed medical journals published papers about the study without raising ethical objections about the treatment of human research subjects. The broader medical community knew about the study and accepted it as legitimate science, revealing widespread ethical blindness in the profession. This institutional failure demonstrates that individual conscience is not sufficient to prevent abuse when systems are designed to perpetuate harm. The regulations and oversight mechanisms created after Tuskegee were designed to prevent institutional failures from enabling future research abuses. Institutional review boards provide external oversight that does not depend on the conscience of individual researchers to protect human subjects. Federal regulations create legal requirements that can be enforced rather than relying on voluntary compliance with ethical principles alone. These systemic changes have been largely effective at preventing abuses similar to Tuskegee in federally funded research conducted since the reforms. However, critics argue that the current system still has gaps that could allow abuses to occur, particularly in privately funded research. International research conducted by American institutions in developing countries has raised concerns about whether ethical standards are consistently applied everywhere. The legacy of Tuskegee requires ongoing vigilance to ensure that the lessons learned are not forgotten as time passes and memories fade. The Tuskegee syphilis study is now taught in medical schools, nursing programs, and public health curricula across the United States of America. Students learn about the study as a cautionary tale about what happens when ethical principles are abandoned in pursuit of scientific knowledge. The study demonstrates that good intentions and scientific value cannot justify research that harms participants and violates their fundamental human rights. It shows that vulnerable populations require special protection because they may be targeted for research that more powerful groups would never accept. It reveals how racism can infect scientific research, leading researchers to view certain populations as acceptable targets for harmful experimentation. These lessons are essential for training the next generation of healthcare professionals and researchers who will shape the future of American medicine. The study also serves as a reminder that progress is not inevitable and that ethical standards must be actively defended against erosion. The researchers who conducted the Tuskegee study were not monsters but ordinary professionals who convinced themselves that their work was acceptable. They operated within a system that normalized their behavior and provided institutional support for research that was fundamentally unethical and harmful. Understanding how this happened is essential for preventing similar abuses in the future when new rationalizations may emerge to justify harm. The Tuskegee syphilis study represents a fundamental betrayal of the trust that patients place in their doctors and their government institutions. The men who participated believed they were receiving medical care from professionals who had their best interests at heart and wanted to help. Instead, they were used as research subjects in an experiment designed to observe their suffering and death from a completely treatable disease. This betrayal was compounded by the involvement of Black medical professionals and institutions that participants trusted as members of their own community. The Tuskegee Institute's involvement gave the study legitimacy that it did not deserve and implicated a respected Black institution in the abuse. Nurse Eunice Rivers, who served as the primary liaison between researchers and participants, was a trusted member of the community who facilitated harm. These complications make the study's legacy even more painful because the betrayal came from within the community as well as from outside. The study raises difficult questions about complicity and responsibility that do not have easy answers even decades after the facts became known. How much did the Black professionals involved know about the study's true purpose, and what responsibility do they bear for participating in it? These questions continue to be debated by historians and ethicists who study the complex dynamics of race, power, and medicine in America. The Tuskegee syphilis study ended over 50 years ago, but its impact continues to shape American medicine and public health policy today. The regulatory framework created in response to the study governs all human subjects, research, and has prevented countless potential abuses since. The distrust created by the study continues to affect health outcomes in Black communities, contributing to disparities that persist despite progress. The memory of the study serves as a warning about what can happen when ethical principles are abandoned in pursuit of scientific goals. The survivors and their families continue to live with the consequences of what was done to them by their own government decades ago. The Tuskegee syphilis study is a story about racism, power, and the failure of institutions to protect those who trusted them completely. It is a story about ordinary people who were used and discarded by a system that viewed them as expendable subjects rather than human beings. It is a story about the courage of one man who refused to remain silent and exposed the truth to a nation that needed to know. It is a story about the long struggle for justice and accountability that continues even now, more than 50 years after the exposure. And it is a story about the ongoing work required to rebuild trust and ensure that such abuses never happen again in our society. The men of the Tuskegee syphilis study deserve better than what they received from their government and their medical professionals who failed them. They deserve to be told the truth about their condition and given the treatment that could have saved their lives and protected families. They deserve to be treated as patients worthy of care, not as subjects to be observed and documented until death finally claimed them. They deserve the basic human dignity that was denied to them by a system that viewed their lives as less valuable than scientific data. The least we can do now is remember what happened to them and ensure that their suffering was not entirely in vain for future generations. Their story must be told so that future generations understand the consequences of allowing racism and scientific arrogance to override basic human ethics. Their names should be remembered as victims of one of the most shameful episodes in the history of American medicine and government betrayal. And their legacy should inspire continued vigilance against the forces that would sacrifice human lives and dignity in pursuit of knowledge or power. The Tuskegee syphilis study is over, but its lessons must never be forgotten as long as medical research continues to involve human subjects. The price of forgetting is too high, as the men of Macon County, Alabama learned at the cost of their health, their lives, and families. We owe it to them to remember, to learn, and to ensure that what happened to them never happens to anyone else in this nation. This is the true story of the Tuskegee syphilis study, documented in federal archives and preserved for all who seek to understand our history. The evidence is there for anyone who wants to verify these facts and understand how such an atrocity could occur in the United States. The files are open, the truth is known, and the responsibility to learn from this dark chapter belongs to all of us as American citizens. The Tuskegee files remain as testimony to what happened when a government betrayed its most vulnerable citizens in the name of science and progress. May we never forget the men who suffered and died, and may their memory guide us toward a more just and ethical future for everyone. Hakelson News, Devam Ediorum, Kalan 7.00 Karakteri, Tamamul Yorum, I'm Kuralara Uyarak, Fluway then. A manager. The names of the Tuskegee victims were not widely known for decades, their identities buried in government files and medical records. But historians and researchers have worked to recover these names and restore the humanity that the study tried to strip away from them. Charlie Pollard was one of the most prominent survivors, becoming a spokesperson for the victims after the study was finally exposed in 1972. He testified before Congress about his experiences, describing how he trusted the government doctors who told him they were helping his health. Pollard lived until 2000, spending his final years educating others about what had happened to him and his fellow participants in Alabama. Herman Shaw, who spoke at the White House apology ceremony in 1997, dedicated his later years to ensuring the story would never be forgotten. He traveled across the country sharing his testimony, determined that future generations would learn from what happened in Macon County, Alabama. Shaw died in 2001 at the age of 97, having outlived most of his fellow participants and witnessed the formal government acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Ernest Hendon was the last known survivor of the study, passing away in 2004 at the age of 96 after a lifetime marked by betrayal. With his death, the last living connection to the study was severed, leaving only documents, testimonies, and memories to preserve the truth. Fred Simmons, Carter Howard, and Frederick Moss were among the other survivors who attended the 1997 White House ceremony to receive the apology. These men had carried the burden of the study for decades, not fully understanding what had been done to them until the truth emerged. Their willingness to come forward and share their stories helped ensure that the Tuskegee study would not be forgotten or minimized by history. The families of deceased participants have continued the work of preserving memory and demanding accountability from institutions that failed their loved ones. Children and grandchildren of study participants have shared their family stories, adding personal dimensions to the historical and medical documentation available. Some families have participated in oral history projects designed to capture the human impact of the study beyond the cold statistics and reports. These personal testimonies reveal the full scope of the tragedy in ways that government documents and medical papers simply cannot convey adequately. They speak of fathers who died too young, of mothers infected unknowingly, of children born with preventable diseases that shaped their entire lives. They describe the confusion and anger that came with learning the truth about what the government had done to their families for decades. And they express the determination to ensure that their loved one's suffering serves as a warning to prevent future generations from similar betrayal. The Tuskegee History Center in Macon County, Alabama, preserves artifacts and documents related to the study for visitors who want to learn more. The center includes photographs of participants, copies of government documents, and exhibits explaining the study's history and its lasting impact on medicine. Visitors can walk the same grounds where the study was conducted and gain a deeper understanding of the community that was victimized by researchers. The center serves as both a memorial to those who suffered and an educational resource for those seeking to understand this chapter of history. Schools and universities bring students to the center to learn about research ethics and the importance of protecting human subjects from exploitation. Medical professionals visit to understand how their predecessors failed and to recommit themselves to the ethical principles that should guide their practice. The Tuskegee History Center ensures that the physical location of this atrocity remains a place of remembrance and reflection for all who visit. Macon County itself bears the scars of the study, with residents still living with the legacy of distrust that was created by government betrayal. Local health initiatives must work harder to gain community trust because of what happened decades ago to residents' parents and grandparents in the study. Public health workers in the area understand that they are working against a history of exploitation that makes their jobs significantly more difficult. Building trust requires acknowledging what happened, demonstrating respect for community members, and proving through actions that things have truly changed since then. This work is slow and difficult, but it is essential for improving health outcomes in a community that has every reason to be suspicious. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which oversaw the study in its final years, has worked to address its role in this atrocity. The agency has issued formal acknowledgments of wrongdoing and has implemented policies designed to prevent similar ethical failures in future research programs. CDC researchers now receive extensive training in research ethics, with the Tuskegee study serving as a primary example of what must never happen again. The agency has also worked to improve relationships with Black communities, recognizing that trust must be earned through consistent ethical behavior over time. These efforts represent important steps, but they cannot undo the damage that was done or fully restore the trust that was so thoroughly destroyed. The legacy of Tuskegee extends to medical education, where the study is now a standard part of curricula in ethics courses across the country. Future doctors learn about Tuskegee alongside other historical examples of research abuse, including Nazi medical experiments and the exploitation of Henrietta Lacks. These case studies help students understand that medical ethics are not abstract principles but practical requirements with life and death consequences for real people. Students learn to recognize the warning signs of unethical research and to speak up when they see practices that violate the rights of patients. They are taught that the pursuit of scientific knowledge can never justify the exploitation of vulnerable people who trust medical professionals to help them. This education is essential for creating a medical profession that will never again allow an atrocity like Tuskegee to occur under its watch. The Tuskegee syphilis study also influenced the development of bioethics as an academic discipline that examines ethical issues in medicine and research. Bioethicists study cases like Tuskegee to develop frameworks for evaluating the ethics of medical research and clinical practice in complex situations. They work to anticipate new ethical challenges that may arise as medical technology advances and new forms of research become possible in the future. The field of bioethics owes much of its existence to the public outrage generated by Tuskegee and other revelations of research abuse in the 1970s. Today, bioethicists serve on institutional review boards, advise government agencies, and help shape policies that protect research subjects from exploitation and harm. Their work represents an ongoing effort to apply the lessons of Tuskegee to new situations and ensure that ethical principles keep pace with scientific progress. The Tuskegee syphilis study remains relevant today because the conditions that allowed it to happen have not been entirely eliminated from American society. Racism continues to affect healthcare, with Black Americans experiencing worse health outcomes than white Americans across a wide range of medical conditions. Distrust of medical institutions remains higher among Black Americans, affecting everything from routine healthcare to participation in clinical trials for new treatments. Vulnerable populations continue to be at risk of exploitation by researchers who may view them as convenient subjects rather than people deserving of protection. The power imbalance between researchers and subjects persists, requiring ongoing vigilance to ensure that informed consent is truly informed and truly voluntary. These ongoing challenges mean that the lessons of Tuskegee must be continually relearned and applied to new situations as they arise in medicine. The study serves as a permanent reminder that progress in research ethics is not guaranteed and that constant vigilance is required to maintain standards. The men of the Tuskegee syphilis study were ordinary people who wanted nothing more than to live healthy lives and provide for their families. They trusted their government and their doctors, believing that the medical care they were promised would help them overcome the challenges they faced daily. Instead, they were used as research subjects in an experiment that prioritized scientific data over their health, their lives, and their basic human dignity. Their betrayal was complete and systematic, carried out by institutions that were supposed to protect them and professionals who had sworn to do no harm. For 40 years, they suffered while researchers watched and documented, waiting for death to provide the final data points in their cruel experiment. When the truth finally emerged, it shocked a nation and forced a reckoning with the racism that had allowed such an atrocity to occur. The reforms that followed have saved countless lives by establishing protections that prevent researchers from exploiting vulnerable people in the pursuit of knowledge. But the damage done to the men of Tuskegee and their families can never be fully repaired, no matter how many apologies are issued or reforms implemented. Their suffering stands as permanent testimony to what happens when a society allows racism and scientific arrogance to override basic principles of human decency. The Tuskegee syphilis study is a wound in American history that is scarred but never fully healed, a reminder of sins that cannot be undone. We remember the men who suffered and died so that their sacrifice might prevent others from experiencing the same betrayal at the hands of those in power. We honor their memory by maintaining the ethical standards that their suffering helped establish, and by remaining vigilant against future violations of human rights. And we tell their story so that no one can claim ignorance of what happened and what must never be allowed to happen again in this nation. The Tuskegee files are closed, but their lessons remain open for all who seek to understand the true cost of betraying human trust and dignity. This was the Tuskegee syphilis study, documented in the archives of the United States government, preserved forever as a warning to future generations of Americans.